Hello, all, and welcome to the next episode of the Horror Countdown podcast. I'm your host, Don Anelli, and with me tonight is a very special guest. I have author David O'Hanlon.
Hey Don, good to be on.
Thank you for joining me tonight. We decided to pick for tonight's episode 10 horror films you may have missed. So, any particular reason for this topic?
I see those lists all the time online, and it's always like cult classics or kind of newer stuff that's gotten a lot of hype. Like Autopsy of Jane Doe, definitely one people should see. But at the same time, it got a lot of social media push. It got a lot of talk at the festivals and for the genre magazines, the websites. So there's a lot of those that come out every year though that just kind of get overlooked. And another thing is, to me, the 80s get all the love. Like that's where all of our great franchises came from. So we always talk about 80s horror. But for me, the 90s was like the best time for like pure entertainment in horror. Just because you had the premium channels were coming out. TVs are more affordable than ever. VCRs are more affordable than ever. So you had more direct to video, and everybody was rushing to get material out. And it was just kind of like giving the nuts the keys to the asylum. So you got movies in the 90s that will never fly again. Like, it's just, you can't pull them off. So I think there's a lot of great stuff out there that just kind of got overlooked. And the market has been oversaturated at times too. And also, my girlfriend has never seen horror movies before. She's very sheltered life. And she got me thinking about it. If you're bringing somebody into the horror genre, or you're into the horror genre yourself, and you start with something like Seven or the Hannibal Lecter stuff, and then go back to Psycho, like it just doesn't work as well for you. So I think you're more likely to go in seeing those cult classics than you are to go in seeing the big groundbreaking films of the 60s or 70s or even 80s. If there's just been something that's more recent, if you like Hostel and Saw, you're probably not going to enjoy things like 2000 Maniacs or the other Herschel Gordon Lewis films, even though they're the ones that made that possible. So I feel like a lot of times those lists are kind of, biased towards the idea that, well, I've been watching horror for 20 years and I've never seen this film, as opposed to, these are people that have been doing it forever and they're introducing people to films. So I just feel like there's a lot that gets missed, and it's a good idea to kind of, share some of these rarer films with people when you can.
All right. Well, I mean, I can't agree more. I'm always down to expose people to new stuff just because, like you said, the idea that there's so much that comes out, everything, you can kind of get a sense of what's going to get hyped and what's going to not be just by seeing, your posts on social media, what gets talked about in Fangoria or Bloody Disgusting or Dread Central. And then it's always like, that one fringe lunatic that you have that just pops up every now and then who's claiming this is like the best film of the year, but nobody knows about it because, he's only followed by 4 or 5 of you. So his posts don't get seen. But then, 3 or 4 years later, by the time you finally get around to it, it's like, holy crap, he was right.
Right, definitely.
Yeah. I've been in, I've seen that happen a couple of times where I've managed to see something and then he pops in. It's like, I was raving about this 3 years ago. Nobody knows about it. And yeah, I'm a big fan of doing stuff like this. So yeah, this was a fun topic and a fun list to come up with. So was there anything that you used for judging your list or how you came about
Uh,
it?
about half of the list was ones that I loved when they first came out and have stuck with me for years. If you read my stuff, you see that it's a lot of entertainment first. It's very, Tales from the Crypt kind of, or it's not meant to, get you thinking. It's get you to stop thinking and just have some fun for a change. If you want to be depressed, that's what social media is for. If you want to be scared, that's what the news is for. So I think that horror should always be fun. It was my escape from a lot of bad stuff. So there's a lot of those, especially 90s films that really kind of took me away from what I was dealing with. And I kind of focused on that for about half the list. And also every October, I do my 31 for 31. And it's not entirely different from what I do every day or every month, but this year I decided to challenge myself and only watch 31 films I'd never seen before. And I came across a few that I really dug and some that I really hated. but I also came across a couple of really new ones that I just haven't been hearing about. So I wanted to get them out there, and I've got them on my list, and I've got a few other ones on there. So
All right. Well, it's sounds interesting. I kind of went a similar approach. Not necessarily films that I'm very strongly attached to, but films I really like that I don't hear a lot about. Stuff that, maybe it pops up every 2 or 3 times over the course of like a year or something like that as like, first time watch, why didn't I know about this before kind of a thing. So yeah, that's sort of where I took it. But if we're starting, let's start in. Let's hear your number 10.
so my number 10 is actually only 6 months old. It's been kind of a festival darling. It's won over 40 awards. There were 30 nominations, and I haven't heard about it any damn where. It was called Girl Next, and I'm not even sure how I ended up watching this. Like, I think it just started auto playing on Tubi or something. It's definitely not the kind of film that I would normally watch based off of its description. It's about sex trafficking, so it's a very dark kind of film. It's a lot of trigger warning stuff on that one. But the way it's done is so different from other films that I've seen like this. Uh, the director's done a few indie films, but again, he's not really super huge. Zeph Daniel, though, actually wrote it, and he kind of went MIA for the last 20 years. He used to write under a different name, and he wrote Society and Bride of Reanimator. So if you're familiar with those, you kind of got an idea for how batshit this movie can get,
Hmm.
but then multiply it by like 11 because it just goes way out there. It's just you're never really sure what you're watching. There's lots of hallucinations. There's mind control, and it all starts playing together, so you're really not ever sure what you're seeing. So I really dug that. I've heard they're working on a sequel from the director, so I'm really excited to see if that comes to fruition. It's so weird. It's definitely worth checking out just for the chance to say you've seen it because you'll never see anything else like it. It's so out there.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never heard of this, so I'm definitely intrigued because it sounds kind of interesting. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Society and Bride of Reanimator. So yeah, that's a great selling point. I'm kind of intrigued about that one. I'll keep an
Yeah,
eye out
I
for it for
really,
sure.
like I said, I don't know how I got to that one, but I was really glad that I did afterwards. Like I said, it's kind of dark, hard to watch at times, but the acting is so fantastic. The visual effects are not the best, but they also represent kind of like the mind being messed with. So it kind of works that they're a little bit cheesier.
Hmm. All right. Well, that sounds interesting. Yeah, like I said, I'll definitely keep an eye out for it because I haven't heard of it. So, all right. You're number 9.
My number 9 is actually an old movie, but it was a first time watch for me, and it'd be a first time watch for most people because it's also been a lost movie for over 20 years. This is Mike Mendez's first film, 1996, Killers. And there's like 200 movies called Killers. So uh,
Yeah, that's. I mean, if you're just gonna sell me on that title, I'm gonna need a little more.
it's called The Killers. So kind of got to narrow it down with the date. This was Mike Mendez's first film. I'm a big fan of his work. He always does films that are really good, but never quite great, though. So I'm always hoping to find that one. Apparently, it was his first film because that one was just fantastic. This came out 96, 97, and very quiet direct to video release. Afterwards, it was out of print, and if you didn't see it on VHS back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you just didn't see it. It was lost until about 2019. Somebody found it, restored it, it hit the streaming services, and hopefully we'll soon hit Blu-ray. But I started this as background noise just based on the cover image, and I got to listen to the dialogue in the background. I was like, wait, so what the hell am I watching? And backed it up to the beginning, and just enthralled with this film the whole way through. It's kind of based off of the Menendez brothers, and that's kind of where you think it's going from the opening scenes. And then it just kind of goes further and further down this rabbit hole afterwards with the Psycho brothers escaping from prison. They go to settle a grudge, end up at this pretty normal, super, chill, family friendly household. And it turns out that they're all like fans of the two killers, and except for the dad. And then you start kind of getting further into it, and I don't want to give anything away, but you don't see anything that happens in this movie coming. There's some shoddy dialogue at times where they have, they didn't fact check something or there's a continuity error, but it's just little tiny things that really don't
Mm.
take away from the film. They're just things that as a writer I caught and zeroed in on right away. But overall, this is just an insanely fun kind of post Natural Born Killers horror thriller that's not really in any subgenre. It's just kind of its own thing.
That sounds cool. Yeah, selling me on kind of a Natural Born Thrillers connection. That's pretty cool. I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. Because yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, if you're going off of the title, I have no idea which version I'm watching. So, yeah, this sounds pretty cool. I'm definitely intrigued by it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun. My number 8 is another new one. This one's only been out for 9 months, and it's gotten less fanfare than Girl Next even. It's called Butchers. Again, really simplistic title that could easily be overlooked. What I have tracked down on this, it seems like mainstream critics just kind of are throwing it off to the side. It's just another, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just another Wolf Creek, whatever. But then like the horror fans are actually kind of getting behind it. But again, it's the websites they're talking about. It's not getting any like mainstream love anywhere. So it was just a really absurd movie. It's kind of set in the late '90s. It's not a fun movie really. It's kind of very dark. But it's just so well made. Like everybody's performance is fantastic in it. Um, we have a lot of the cliches and stuff, but they kind of play against them. So another thing I love about it is it takes place during the day. Like most of these, we're gonna shoot it. It's low budget. Let's do it at night, so we don't have to spend the money on the lighting or whatever. And everything's kind of like off in the grain. You can't really tell what's going on. Saves money on the special effects, but no, they put everything right out of the daylight for you. And to me, that makes this a lot scarier because it's like these guys don't just come out at night. Uh, it's like I said in the late '90s. It's a group of friends. Their car breaks down, of course, and they find themselves at the mercy of these two redneck brothers. And there was some really just cool stuff in the making of it too. But Simon Phillips is actually a pretty accomplished indie actor. He did what was it called now? It's a Killer Santa Claus movie that came out a few years ago. I cannot remember the name of it now, but it wasn't anything special. It was fun, but he's pretty accomplished for a British indie actor, and he's playing this down home like South Carolina redneck basically, and they do so much with his dialogues where you're seeing that he's highly educated, but he's educated without having ever been in schools because he can quote Shakespeare, but he messes up little sentence structure things that kind of show you that it's not a formal education that he has. And I think it just have those little nuances throughout that make it really creepy and realistic and really make him stand out. So it's a very well done film overall, even though it does play to some of the tropes and it does play to some of those old cliches. There's more, you see a lot of homage in it.
Yeah, I think I've seen this, and I do agree. I liked it more than I thought I would. I think some of the cliches may have gotten to me, and I wasn't as high. I'm not probably as high on it as you are, but it is better than what you would think. It's not that bad of a film. So you're number 7?
Number 7, I was torn between a lot of films starring the same actor, but ended up narrowing it down to Late Phases from 2014. And this one's starting to get a little bit of traction just because there aren't that many great werewolf movies out there. But I absolutely love Nick Damisi. He's a great actor, and as I was torn between this and Mulberry Street and Stakeland, but I feel like this is the one that kind of gets the least amount of love. And as much as I like Demisi for his acting, it's his writing that I really enjoy. He wrote Cold in July, and he writes Happen Leonard, which is like my favorite TV show, and sucks that they finally canceled it. But it's just the werewolf itself doesn't look that great, uh, but the transformation is just amazing. And also, think I kind of see like after I like the first time I saw the werewolf, was just like, oh my god, that's horrible. It was like some kind of hobgoblin on steroids. But after I got to looking at it more, and it's almost like whereas normally you see the wolf features attached to the person, this is more like a wolf with like people features. Like it has more humanistic cheekbones and stuff, and it has kind of this human look. Like the wolf is taking precedent over the rest of it. So I really dug that. The more I've watched the films, I think I've watched it like 4 or 5 times now, and each time I kind of appreciate the wolf design a little bit more, even though it still kind of grates on my nerves. But it's just a really well acted film with a great transformation. The father son dynamic just does so much for the character. It could have been a very stale storyline, just werewolf at a nursing home eating old people, or something more kind of tongue in cheek and comedic like Bubba Hotep. But they went something that actually I feel has like some kind of anchor to the real world and it's more grounded.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this as well. I definitely agree. It sounds it's better than what it sounds like if you were just to describe it. I definitely agree. It's one of my favorite transformation sequences. I'm not a fan of the design like you are, but yeah, I definitely agree. It did make my list just because I've seen, like you said, a little bit more traction to it recently. But I definitely agree. This is a fun time, and it's definitely one that I think a lot of werewolves or even creature fans would probably dig. It's a great one. I really like that.
So my number six, I went with another werewolf movie, but this one's a little bit different. It's a lot different. I went with '93's Full Eclipse. This was an HBO original. It did get some like minor theatrical release, but for the most part, it was on HBO or VHS where you didn't see it. So it was easy to miss. But it's Anthony Hickox that directed, from Waxworks and Hellraiser 3, which is my favorite of the franchise, as cheesy as it is. You got Mario Van Peebles, you got Bruce Payne, who is always an amazing villain. You can put him in the crappiest movie. He's going to escalate every scene he's in, though. And it had wonderful writers. I did not actually know this until I was going through, kind of just making some random notes for it. But I knew one of the writers was Richard Matheson's son, the writer of I Am Legend. I did not know the other one was Michael Reeves, who wrote for pretty much every awesome cartoon from like the 80s to the 90s. He did the Batman animated series, Ninja Turtles, 3 different series for Masters of the Universe, like Gargoyles. And reading that like made the movie make so much more sense to me because you could totally see that 1980s 1990s Saturday morning cartoon excitement and fun in this movie. It's about cops that are given a drug to give them werewolf-like property or qualities. Of course, their leader is Adam Garrow, which is French for wolf, because he's very subtle like that, played by Bruce Payne. And he recruits all these cops that have lost partners and have issues to go out and do what the rest of the cops can't do. So he gives them this drug and they start sprouting claws and their faces kind of wolf up a little bit. They almost have like this Wolverine-like quality. And you're watching it at the beginning and it's just this straight up John Woo action film is what it looks like. It's jumping through the air, double gunning, exactly what you expect from a low budget action movie in 1993. And then all of a sudden, werewolves. And they just kind of play to it in a different direction. And then you start kind of getting a little bit more information and finding out where this drug is coming from and how they're getting their powers from it and stuff like that. It's just a really well acted film. Everybody does an amazing job in it. Patsy Kensit is one of the cops, and so Bruce Payne. You got Mario Van Peebles. It's just a really well acted, really fun film. It's definitely one where you take your brain out, set it in the seat beside you, and just enjoy it. Though.
Nice. Yeah. It's been on my list for a while. I've been trying to track it down because it sounds interesting, but yeah, I haven't gotten to it yet. So I'd love to check that one out sometime.
I'd always remembered it. I had it on VHS years and years ago, and I happened to walk into a used video store here in town, and it was sitting face out on the shelf of all things, and I was like across the room, zeroed in on it. It's like I'm getting it. I don't care how much it is, and ended up with it in my collection for like $8. So super excited to find that one. It was just kind of one of those oddball finds that happens every once in a while.
Nice. All right, number 5.
Number 5, I went with 2003's Willard. Uh,
Hmm.
I saw the original when I was a little kid. I cannot remember anything about it, but I picked this one up. I hadn't even heard of it. It released in theaters at the same time as Dreamcatcher and The Day the Earth Stood Still. So a movie with Kristen Glover talking to rats just really didn't hold up to those, and it was very quickly out of the theaters and kind of forgotten about. And so there's a used video store here that does buy two get one free. So I'll always pick up a couple I want, and then I'll pick up one that I've never heard of, or one that I haven't seen in a long time. Want to give a second viewing to. And I found this one. I like Crispin Glover, so I decided to give it a try, and it was definitely worth it. It's very creepy, very atmospheric. He's the villain, but you feel so sorry for him. At the same time, he's the hero. It's just a really cool movie, and they actually used real rats, which was awesome. They had over 500 of them that they had specially trained for their task in the movie, so they could actually get the rats to perform whatever Willard needed them to, and then they would have to corral all the rats again, throw them back in their cages, bring out the next set for the next stunt. But it's really cool. They had stunt rats in it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I did remember liking it. I did like a lot of the stunt work with the rats, making them practical. Um, I may not be as high on it as you are, but it's a lot better than I thought it would be, and it's not one that I think negatively about. It wasn't bad. I did enjoy it. So number 4.
Number 4, this was a hard one. I scratched out like 7 other number 4s for this one, but I finally decided on one that's actually been a bastard for me to track down. It's Cemetery Man, 1994. It's one of those that you can find it uploaded on YouTube every once in a while, but it's just kind of disappeared. It was released direct to video in the States back in '96. It's an Italian made movie. It's zombie horror, philosophy, comedy, almost eroticism, just all in a big ball. So the first time I saw it, I think I was 12 or 13, and I was kind of just distracted by the fact there was boobs. But then like I watched it again, and I didn't really appreciate it as much because, like I said, it is more philosophical at times, and some of the comedy is much drier and satirical. Then it's like, got a little bit older. I watched it, probably 19, 20 years old. I started kind of getting some of it and kind of understanding it a little bit better. And it's one of those that I go back when I can and watch it. And each time I like it a little bit more. It's easy to see why it's got a cult following, I think. Like once you kind of get into it, and it's one of those you have to actually sit down with the intention of watching it, though. And once you do, I think it's over the top, Dead Alive style, but at the same time, it's got that serious edge to it, which kind of makes it an oddball because you kind of want to laugh at it and you kind of want to feel bad about it, and at the same time, you're just kind of enjoying the whole ride. And it's just a very interesting movie.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it as well. Like you, the first few times it wasn't that big of it didn't leave that big of an impression. Like you said, it's a little too philosophical for most tastes, but it's one that I think you have to have a little bit more experience and exposure to get it because of those philosophical leanings. So I think once you have that, I think it kind of plays a lot better. So yeah, a lot of the sleazier elements were a lot more attractive on first viewing, outside of the philosophical elements. But yeah, it's a great pick. I'm a fan of it, and it's one that I'm glad to see gets recognition when it gets brought up.
It definitely. So that one was one I'm trying to find a copy for a while now. I just have to kind of settle for finding it on YouTube every so often. Like it'll get taken down and somebody else put it back up. But
Yeah, because I think there's only been a legitimate DVD release. I don't think there's an actual blue of it yet.
no, as far as I've been able to find, there's no blue, and the DVD's been out of print for a while now. So
Yeah.
uh, that puts us at number three. And this one, honestly, probably I should have flipped it with my number one, but I enjoy my number one more. So I went with number three as 2001 Session 9.
Hmm.
Um, this one just kind of disappeared. Like it came out kind of quietly. I loved it the first time I saw it. I moved away from where I was, though. We had this little bitty video store. I don't even think it had a name. I think it just said video rental on the side. And that's where I picked it up at. Loved it. I moved to Houston and Blockbuster didn't have it. And it's way too much trouble to drive through Houston to go find a movie. So I wasn't going to go around to the other locations. But then every so often I'll meet somebody who's like, oh, yeah, scariest movie I've ever seen, Session 9. And then I don't hear about it from anybody else again. You know, it's like one of those people that have seen it, love it. Everybody else has never even heard of it. It's like there's no middle ground on it, it seems like. Uh, I thought it was just a really well done movie. It's very psychological. It's kind of realistic at points where even if you're kind of skeptical towards, the idea of like supernatural phenomena, there's still enough going on that's realistic that you're kind of like, well, maybe, this is, what's going on instead. And it still has a way to get to you and kind of get under the skin. Uh, the scoring and the use of sound effects was very well done to create atmosphere. And they filmed it in Danvers Asylum, which is pretty damn creepy on its own. So it had a lot going for it in terms of just being nasty and terrifying, just in its setting and its atmosphere, and solid acting throughout too. So I think that really helped carry it. And then recently, like 2016, it got a Blu release and started kind of hitting the streaming services. So now I think it's starting to get a little bit of love now that it's more readily available. But so for like 20 years, it just kind of went away and nobody heard about it. So it's kind of fun seeing it getting a little bit of traction, but I definitely love to see it getting the recognition it deserves. Like to me, if you're in that, born in 95 or later crowd, like this is your Shining, basically. Like I think when you watch, Jack Nicholson's Shining, you can still appreciate it, but it doesn't have the same creep out effect that it had for people that grew up in the 70s and 80s watching it. So I think this one does a lot of those same things for a more modern crowd. The cinematography is a little bit crisper. The sound and the direction is just a little bit more post 90s kind of polish to it that I think kind of gets to the younger crowd a little bit easier.
Yeah. When I first saw it, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was just boring and drab and dull and not that interesting. But I came around to it a couple of years ago, and I was impressed with it. It was a lot more chilling than I gave it credit for. The psychological aspects are incredibly well handled. It's one of the few times there's more than a few times where it just like gets under your skin and just like really starts giving you goosebumps and chills. And it, I can't say enough about the location. It's just creepy as hell.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And yeah, I came around to it, and I'm really glad I did because it's a lot better than I gave it credit for when I first saw it because I thought it was terrible. I thought it was just boring and dull, and I definitely one that I gave a second chance to, and I'm glad I did. So it was close to my list. I ended up as an honorable mention just because, like you said, those that have seen it are like really, really like praising it. But if you haven't seen it, nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like one of the things where it's kind of like it ended up on my honorable mentions because of that. But yeah, that's a great one.
My number two, I went with 1995's Castle Freak. This one just got a remake, so I'm hoping that will steer some traffic towards the original. The remake's actually pretty solid. It's not the best at all. Like some of the acting is atrocious, but it is a really fun film, and I thought like especially the little tie-ins to the other Lovecraft stuff was pretty cool. This one was the movie that shouldn't have happened. Basically, it was given very little press. This was a full moon feature, and it was right at the end of their Paramount deal, so they were in a lot of trouble. They've been getting money and spending way over budget. They weren't keeping very good books, so they were going way over budget on other movies. And by the time Paramount got a new head, they were just kind of like, okay, so where is all the money we're giving you? And Charles Band didn't keep very good books, so he couldn't account for it either. And they took some of the money that was meant for a movie Paramount wanted them to make, and instead decided to make Castle Freak. So Stuart Gordon, of course, Reanimator and From Beyond, he takes $500,000, flies to Charles Band's personal castle in Italy, and films this movie in like a week and a half with Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. So he had, like most Charles Band films, he saw the poster art in his office and goes, "What's that movie about?" He goes, "It's about a castle and a freak." It says it right there. Other than that, I don't know. And Stuart Gordon's like, "I want to make that movie." He goes, "Okay, fine. You can make that movie. Just make it about a castle and a freak. And after that, you get free reign." So, he got the actors he wanted. He based part of the screenplay on H.P. Lovecraft's The Outsider, which is a pretty bare bones story if you're familiar with it. And just kind of went from there. And it is just creepy and nasty and like such great practical gore. And every time you think this is just going to be another like typical full moon film, it just exceeds those expectations and gives you like classic Stuart Gordon moments.
I'm a fan. I love this movie. It's probably, I would say, in my top five favorite full moon films. It's so much good fun. Crampton and Combs are just an absolute magical duo together. I love them in Reanimator. I love them in this. It's so much fun, and not even bringing the creature into it. And once that happens, yeah, the film just goes bonkers and off the wall, and I love it. Yeah, it's an absolute blast. I'm glad you picked this one because yeah, it's one of my favorite full moon films.
Yeah, it's definitely my top three. I kind of got like some leeway because technically Trancers is an Empire film, so I can say
Yeah,
it's a
I'm always leery about which one's an official full moon and which one's Empire. So it's not like I have like a definitive list
right.
available, but yeah, especially like in that 87 to 89 range when they were kind of shifting over which is which, but exactly, yeah, if we were doing like a full moon family film, then yeah, this is probably top five, maybe top three, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. This one, I think Puppet Master 3 and Lurking Fear are two of my favorites too.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that brings me to my number one. Like I said, there's better films on this list, but this one just was the most fun. It's a movie I've gone back to over and over again. I tracked down a German Blu-ray for this one, and then of course, like right after I did, it got an American Blu-ray like 3 months later. It's actually on most of the streaming services right now. I'm pretty sure it's the original R-rated cut though that they're streaming. Um, Actually, I even got a poster ordered because I love this movie so much. And that's 1992 Split Second. Uh, this one's sci-fi, but it's also mostly horror. It's Rutger Hauer, Kim Cattrall. Like it's got the best from them. And it's directed by Tony Maylam, who had previously done The Burning. So you got a really competent director, written by Gary Scott Thomas. This was actually the first screenplay he tried to sell. He went on to do Hollow Man and The Fast and the Furious 1 and 2. So he did some really big things afterwards. Stephen Norrington did the special effects. He went on to do Blade and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen before he finally retired from that. But he did another movie called Death Machine that almost made the list, but I decided it was too sci-fi to be on the horror list. So I had to give it up for a split second, though. This one was an HBO original as well. It got a limited theatrical release May and April of '92, which were kind of turbulent times. So its LA release in April just didn't get any like fanfare at all, and it just kind of went straight to the premium channel. So it was really easy to miss this one. I found a VHS copy at a yard sale when I was 13, and me and my nephews would constantly be stealing this copy back and forth from each other because all of us loved it. And every time they come over, it would disappear from my shelf, and I would have to go back over to their house and steal it back again. And it's just kind of one of those I watched so many times that we would always notice when it was gone. Uh, but it's one thing I love about this. It takes place in 2008. It's big, like kind of on global warming, which I thought was really cool because in the 90s you heard about the hole in the ozone layer and like every cheesy sci-fi movie that came out and most of the big budget ones, but you didn't hear about global warming in 1992. And it's global warming's gotten so bad that London has flooded and there's a plague going on and there's rats all over the city. And now there's this giant ass psychic monster that you never get any clarity on. And I love that because you can just think about it for so long afterwards, just like all these different little strings that they have, and you could pull them, and the whole movie might unravel, or it might just lead you to something amazing. It's like they just left it open as to what this creature is, why it does what it does, but it's very sentient, which I also really dug. It's not just another dumb alien ripoff. Like the thing sets traps, it uses guns, it taunts the police. Like it's really into just like whatever it eats, it takes on part of their memories. So at one point they kind of suggested maybe it thinks it's the devil because somebody it ate thought he was, or maybe it really is. And they just kind of go in so many different directions to let you have fun with this renegade psychic cop on the rampage for this vicious killer monster. And it's just like you can't get away with that story anymore. It just makes it kind of that once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's just so much of a blast to watch.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I do have the Blu-ray coming in. It hasn't shipped yet. I put it in a package because I had some extra credits left over, and I wanted. It was interesting enough, and it sounded fun that I wanted it, but it hasn't arrived yet, so I haven't seen it. But
It's definitely
yeah, I've got the. Is it MVD?
yeah. MVD just
Yeah,
did
MVD. Yeah, because I put it in the box. I don't remember. It was. I could have sworn it was Arrow for a second there, but yeah, it's MVD because I had some credits left over for a sale from them, so I put that in my cart, and order hasn't arrived yet. So
yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely a no brain and popcorn kind of movie. Like it's an absolute just blast though.
All right. Well, I guess that means time for my list. So I kind of went all over the place. They're not films that I have like a strong emotional connection to. They're just good films I like that not very many have seen. So my number 10 is a film called Mahakal.
It's one I haven't heard of.
Yeah. So for those that haven't, for like you that haven't heard of it, this is a Bollywood Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nice.
So it's the exact same premise, it's the exact same setup, just done with a Bollywood twist. Basically, a group of students are experiencing a bunch of random nightmares. They gradually discover that it's related to this serial killer that their father ended up putting to death several years earlier, and has come back from the grave with a razor claw on his hand and a striped sweater that's vaguely copyright free, but resembling a specific Christmas sweater. And they have to try to survive. It includes the requisite musical numbers, so don't be put off by that. There's a couple song and dance routines. It's so much fun. It's so goofy. It's so over the top. I have a blast with it. I've recommended it to several people that have never heard of it, and they keep coming back and saying it was so much better than they thought it was going to be. I'd probably even go so far as to say it's better than a lot of the sequels to the genuine sequels to the Nightmare franchise. So
Okay, check that one out.
yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah, it's pretty easy to find, but yeah, for those that haven't seen it, I always recommend it, and they always love it. So that's one of my choices. Number 9 is another foreign film. This one's from Japan. It's called Jigoku.
That one sounds really familiar, but I can't place it.
Okay, so it's from 1960 or 61. I don't remember the exact date. Essentially, a guy and his friend are out drinking one night. One has a few too many drinks. The other one has enough to be sober. He's a little bit more lucid, but they're both really drunk. They end up hitting a girl and they end up killing her, but there's nobody around, so they think they get away scot-free. 1 year later, the anniversary of the death, the one that hit her, he was the drunker of the two. His career is taking off. You know, he's successful, prosperous, and all that. The guy that was trying to stop him, the less drunk one, his life is in shambles. He's psychologically depressed, and his life is in ruins. So they meet up as like I think they meet up for like a class reunion trip or something, but eventually they both end up dying and they both get transported to the Japanese underworld, which is the term Jigoku. It means hell in Japanese. So it turns into this bizarre, I can't even begin to describe it. It's just this over the top, bizarre figuration of hell because in Japanese society, hell is a multi layered system. So you have 7 layers of hell. The bottom rung is murderers and rapists and just like the absolute scum and villainy, and then the top level of hell is like the general good people. There's no heaven or hell, you just get the one. So it's basically the two of them trying to figure out their way out of hell essentially, and it just goes in bizarre places. I mean, the visuals in this are just weird and bizarre. So it's supposedly, I've heard it said is like the first gore film even before Herschel Gordon Lewis. There's a scene where one of the torments in one of the lower rungs is that a man gets his skin flayed off. So he's strapped to the ground, and these two demons just stick a hook in his skin, and then they crank a machine, and just the skin just peels straight off of him.
Nice.
So yeah, it's actually a Criterion release, if I'm not mistaken. So it's out there for those that can find it. But yeah, a lot of Asian horror fans tend to miss this one. It's a really good. Now, a lot of themes about morality and your self-consciousness, whether doing the right thing, doing the right thing versus the easy thing, kind of a thing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. Number 8 is an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation that a lot of people don't seem to know about. The Dunwich Horror from 1970.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, 1970. So basically, a professor at a university ends up coming into contact with this mysterious stranger who claims he needs a special book in his possession, which nobody knows the actual meaning of, but supposedly this mysterious stranger does. And he ends up getting into cahoots with the teacher's best student, and they start falling for each other. But it all turns out to be a ploy, in that the stranger needs the book to finish the ritual that will bring demonic gods from the other world into our dimension. So classic Lovecraft kind of a thing there. The girl is like the supposed, sacrifice that you're supposed to, offer up as, offer up to them, and you finish off your spells and rituals and all that. It's a lot of fun. It kind of has echoes of like the Corman Poe films from earlier in the decade. A lot of the Vincent Price stuff, House of Usher, Mask of the Red Death, and Tomb of Ligeia and stuff like that. So it's really fun. Not necessarily one that I see a lot of Lovecraft fans talk about. Lovecraft adaptations, they always go for Reanimator. You always go for Color Out of Space and stuff like that. So this is one that I really enjoy, and one that a lot of Lovecraft fans would probably dig. So
Yeah, I remember watching that one. It's been 20 years as a teenager, and I thought it was a great film. Very classical, like you were saying, kind of has almost like the old Hammer horror kind of feel to it. So I
Right.
really dug that kind of just very well acted, kind of old school, almost gothic horror, but approach to the cosmic horror. So it's kind of a
Right.
little thing that I think you're right. It gets overlooked entirely. Like you said, it was the H.P. Lovecraft that people had seen. I was going somewhere else entirely, and I'd even drawn a blank on that one. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
forgotten easily.
Yeah. My number seven is Lovecraft-ish, but I went with Dark Waters from 1994.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it's 93 or 94. I've seen conflicting dates for it, so I don't really know for sure. But basically, a woman is told that uh, she's drawn to this monastery on this remote island, and it's something involving her father. Like her father is connected to the monastery in some capacity as like a financial donor, or he's involved with it in some way, but he's recently died and she needs to come to take over like some aspect of it because she's like the next inheritance, and basically comes to find out that there's something mysterious going on behind the covenant walls, and comes to believe that there's like some demonic presence trying to break through, that they're trying to connect. And it's so good. I'm a big fan of this. I mean, I'm a huge Lovecraft fan, so the mysterious old ones coming into our world, secret societies, gothic horror, tons of a lot of Italian Gothic, stuff from the 60s, brought into the 90s. Really old school kind of a flair. Lots of slimy creature gore thrown in at the end. I'm a big fan of this, and I'm really, really, I would love to see a lot of people get into this one because it's a lot of fun, and it's something it's gotten overlooked just because it's a 90s film that and that foreign film from the 90s that it feels a lot more older than what it really is. So
Yeah, my mentor Brad Carter, he does a lot of work with Severin Films. They just did a blue for that a couple of years ago, I think it was. And the first time I watched it, like it took me a while, like 'cause it does have that older feel, and it does kind of have like it almost has like a '70s kind of vibe to it. Excuse me. And it took me a minute to kind of get into it. I had to kind of stop and focus on I need to focus on this movie if I'm going to watch it. And I really dug it. I really wanted to go back and revisit it. So I had so much other stuff going on lately, but
mm.
it was definitely a lot of. It was an interesting film. I won't say it was a super fun film, but it was definitely
Yeah.
one I enjoyed watching. It's just very well made all the way around. It looks great effects too.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a big fan of that. So my number six is one that um is another Asian film. There's one more on the list just for those that don't know, but it's an Asian film that I don't see a lot of people talking about. It's Mr. Vampire.
I know I saw that a long time ago. I think it's the one I'm thinking of, anyways. I know the name.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one that not a lot of know about. Essentially, it concerns a Buddhist priest and his two disciples. They're tasked with carrying the body of this town alderman back to his estate to be reburied. There's some kind of land ownership thing that they have to move his body, but so I don't remember that part. But they have to bring his body back to their hometown, and it turns out that the body is actually a vampire. So he gets up and he's reanimated and starts wreaking havoc and all that. Now the thing is that even though what I said sounds like a horror, this is a flat out 80s style Jackie Chan comedy. If you've seen any of like Jackie Chan's 80s style Hong Kong films, this is a horror comedy version of one of his films. The slapstick in this is tremendously funny. There's so many sight gags and just well, the two assemblants are these bumbling idiots that are always getting into mischief, and they always have to have their master bail them out either through physical violence or the threat of physical violence. Everybody is a martial artist, is like a 10th degree black belt in martial arts. So there's, jumping all over the walls and spinning kicks and just like, fully fledged energetic choreography. It's a blast. I would love to see more people discover this one because it's funny, it's got some horror elements, but it's just balls to the wall energy and it's a ton of fun.
I feel like I've seen that one, but I'm definitely gonna have to revisit it regardless because it sounds awesome.
Yeah. Um, it's really good. So like I said, I got a couple of other Asian ones on here. Number 5 is a Japanese film called The Vampire Doll. So this is a first of a it's a part of a trilogy that's affectionately called the Bloodthirsty trilogy, and it's gothic horror by way of Toho Studios. So imagine the same studio that produced Godzilla films doing Hammer style gothic horror in Japan. It, it it's it sounds like an odd combination, but it works. It's, creaking windows, hallways with billowing curtains, candlelights. It's legitimately gothic horror done in Japan by the studio that created Godzilla. And so well, there's 3 films. The first one, Vampire Dolls. There, the second one is Evil of Dracula, and then the third one is called Lake of Dracula. They're all good. They're not connected in any sense other than they're all directed by the same person and they're all by the same studio. So that's why they're sort of like dubbed the Bloodthirsty trilogy. So they're not like you have to see one to see the other. They're unrelated films, but they're packaged together in a Blu-ray by Arrow. And like I said, the connection is that they're by the same studio and directed by the same person. But they're all gothic horror, 70s style gothic horror done in Japan. And they're visually amazing. There's a lot of atmosphere in these films. And even though the Blu-ray came out, I think last year or the year before, there's not a lot that know about them. So I highly recommend them. They're so much fun. I definitely recommend them.
I like Toho and I like Hammer, so I think Toho's take on Hammer would be pretty entertaining. So I definitely
Yeah,
have to check all 3 of those out.
yeah. I personally, from what I've known, the first one and the third one are considered the best. The second one is still really good, but it's considered like the lessest of the one just because, you got to rank them somehow, and that's always the one that falls at the bottom. It's not that it's considered a weak film, but it's just always, somebody recommends them, they always say 1 and 3 are the best, and then 2 is just at the bottom just because you got to rank them somehow.
Right, right.
So, yeah, definitely check those out. Number 4 is well, it's not an Asian horror, but it's an Italian horror film. I went with Torso from 1973. Uh, I'm a huge Giallo fan. I love Italian horror in general, but I'm a huge Giallo fan, and this is one of the best ones. Essentially, a student is murdered at this prestigious university, and her best friend is stricken. It's like, well, I just ended. That could have been me. You know, I was supposed to meet her. She never showed. She ended up dying. It could have been me, like that kind of thing. Like she has like a breakdown and all that. So her teacher suggests that she goes off to have a party with her friends to like, just blow off some steam and relax. And they go to this cabin out in the middle of the countryside just for the weekend and, just let loose and all that. But it turns out the killer followed them there and begins stalking them one by one. It's considered a gateway sort of between Giallo and Slasher. Um, it it feels slasher more than anything, but it's still technically considered a giallo. The kills in this are brutal. There's some of the bloodiest in the genre. Tons of nudity, great looking women. But the big selling point to this one is the final showdown. And I'm not overstating this when I say that it's a cinema verite showdown, where I really don't want to spoil this, but basically the killers knocked off everyone except the final girl. But the final girl is injured. She ends up during the trip, she ends up spraining her ankle. So she's hobbling around, she can't move. And she survives the massacre because she's drugged up from the experience. So the killer doesn't know she's there. And the killer begins hacking the bodies apart. And I mean, like, hacking the bodies to pieces. So she has to survive without being noticed. And you kind of, there's hints throughout that the killer notices that she's there, but she doesn't know that the killer knows. So there's just tons of suspense. It's so good. It's one of my favorite giallos of all time. Nobody knows about it. The director Sergio Martino, everybody always goes to his first two films, Strange Advice of Mrs. Ward and All the Colors of the Dark, because those end up having Edwidge Fenech in them. And if you know Edwidge Fenech, you know one of the reasons why those films are so popular. But yeah, nobody knows about Torso. Very few have seen it, and it's a shame. It's one of the best in the genre.
Yeah, this is one I've actually only seen once, and I really wanted to revisit it. When I did my first Babysitter Massacre book with Enric Kudo, I wanted it to be very Giallo inspired. I love the Argento stuff, of course, and one of my favorites. It falls in that same category of right between Giallo ending and slasher beginning is Pieces. So that was like my number one influence on it. So a lot of times before I start a project, because I do write very cinematically and my process is based on filmmaking, I'll just kind of flood myself with material to try to kind of get that right mindset. So I watched all the ones that I love, all the ones that I knew, and then I watched a bunch of new stuff. And Torso was, I think, on Amazon or something, and went ahead and checked that one out. And I'm like over here making notes. I'm just constantly like stopping and like staring at the screen. Like, shit, I got back that up. What just happened? Like, that was so cool. And yeah, it's definitely one I want to revisit because I did have a great time with that one. I thought it was really well done. Uh, it's definitely it's a great bloody kills and just fantastic gore. So it's definitely the one of the let's say those early right on the cusp between
Yeah.
Giallo falling out and slasher starting to take over, and those are just such great films. They have that giallo tension with that slasher gore, and I think that a lot of the slashers kind of started to lose that tension and like the mystery element. So it
Mm,
makes for a very interesting little like 5 year period of films that were just the best of both worlds.
yeah, exactly. My number three is one that from our earlier conversations about Full Moon. This is another one of my personal favorites. My number three is The Dead Hate the Living.
Yes.
Uh, I cannot I cannot express how much I adore this film. This is a zombie fan's wet dream. It's sort of a meta take on it. So basically, a Maverick director has secured the location for his new shoot. He's trying to make his, quote unquote masterpiece, but everybody is completely, just falling at the part at the cracks. There's, tons of dissension. Nobody's, you know, he's pushing them to the, beyond their comfort zone, and he's trying to, keep everybody in line, but they're off doing their own thing. And eventually they stumble across this weird machine in the basement that has a body inside. And the director gets the bright idea, let's do the first zombie film with an actual dead body, not knowing that the body's still alive, and ends up turning around, unleashing a zombie virus on the crew and all of a sudden now the gates of hell are unleashed and the army of the dead are trying to break through and kill everybody on this film stage. And I cannot express enough how much fun this movie is. It's just packed to the wall with everything a zombie fan could want. I mean, there's meta references galore. There's tons of just little in jokes and asides. One character even famously makes the phrase "make them die slowly." Just you know, all of that is just fantastic. And then on top of all that, just fantastic zombie makeup, tons of gore, just balls to the wall fun. And if it's not in my top three, is I would be shocked if it's not in my top three favorite full moon films of all time. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the last great films that Full Moon did before they kind of went into their downward spiral of the mid late 2000s. Started with the more of the Evil Bong and Ginger Dead Man, which are still fun, but they're just not the same Full Moon anymore. I think this was kind of like one of those last great films that they did, and one of the lowest budgeted ones too of that time
Yeah.
period. So it was really impressive what they pulled off with that one. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Definitely before zombie movies really jumped the shark and kind of became every movie that came out. So it was really nice seeing that kind of self-referential kind of humor to it.
Yeah. All right. My number two is another Italian horror film. I went with The Long Hair of Death from 1964. It's basically this is nothing new. You've seen the story done in Italian horror multiple times. It's a woman who's sentenced to death for witchcraft who ushers a curse saying, my vengeance will live forever, or, your descendants are next, or something like that. Several years later, the daughter ends up coming of age, and the guy who put the mother to death is taken an interest in her, but the mother spirit indeed comes back from the grave and spooky stuff starts happening. Some of it witchcraft related, some of it not, but several years go by. The mother's dead, but the daughter's still alive. She's now in the possession of the guy that murdered the mother. But the curse comes back to life, and it's not known whether or not the curse is real or the daughter inherited the witchcraft powers. It's done by the guy who is mostly well known as the director of The Green Slime. I think it's, if I remember correctly, I always butcher the last name. I want to say it's Antonio Margheriti. I get the last name confused. I think that's the closest I've heard of it. But it's gothic horror out the atmosphere. Barbara Steele, who most people know from Black Sunday, and um, I think she was also in a film called Horror Castle that was like a public domain film for many years, and it just sort of like made the rounds as like 50 films on like a box set kind of a DVD kind of a thing. She's in this. She plays the two roles, and it's really fun. Like I said, gothic atmosphere, lots of witchcraft and curses and supernatural happenings. It's a shame that this one kind of just slipped through the cracks because it's a fantastic film. Maybe not the most original, but just it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is one I hadn't heard of. I definitely need to check that one out. So I love the Italian stuff. So there's not really a lot of great gothic horror coming out now. So it's like nice to revisit the older stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll have to look up.
And then my number one, I'm sure very few have heard of this one. Another Asian film, but this is just this is the special film for me. It is The Boxer's Omen.
I missed that one.
Yeah, very few have. So essentially, I'll try to keep this a spoiler. I'll try to keep this brief because there's a lot going on, but it's worth it. So the main story is this small-time hoodlum. His brother is a professional boxer. He ends up winning the match. He ends up winning this title match, but the loser is so incensed that he cripples them. He cripples them after the match, and so the hoodlum vows revenge and travels to Thailand to issue a challenge, a rematch for his family's honor. But he ends up coming across this order of monks who believe that the hoodlum is the reincarnated celestial twin brother of the head monk of their order who died years earlier in battle with the rival wizard of a separate religious order that's trying to overthrow the world and need him to complete the religious training to become a monk for them in order to continue the fight. And that's the first 20 minutes. No, seriously, that's the first 20 minutes of the film. So this is it's a Hong Kong black magic movie. So you get spells, potions, vomiting galore, tons of body horror. I mean, there's a scene where a person ends up developing blisters on their body the size of their head. And it looks like a werewolf transformation where just like his skin is festering and boiling, and all of a sudden he just explodes into this viscera of gore. There's scenes where, I'm not joking, the monk is he's in this special order, and he ends up turning the spell that makes him look like this ceremonial vase with writing all over his body, and he uses it to ward off this attack by vicious bats that are trying to circle around and kill him. And the bats just break away and explode into flames, and all of a sudden you see like this swarm of crocodile skulls appear out of nowhere and just try to grab at him, and he has to use his powers to evade these giant crocodile skulls that just appeared out of nowhere. And it's just an absolute mind trip. I mean, the visuals in this thing are just absolutely amazing, but nobody knows about it. And I cannot express my love for this film enough. It is one of the best I've ever seen. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and I would love more people to know about this. I've shared it with a few, and they absolutely adore this movie. And my only hope, and I really hope this comes to fruition, is that when Arrow announced their partnership with the Shaw Brothers, because that's the studio that did this. This is the same studio that produced all those 70s and 80s, kung fu flicks. They ended up making this, and I only hope that when this film gets if this film is released by Arrow, I really hope this film explodes, because it is amazing. I love this film.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my have to track down. It sounds awesome. And I love Shaw Brothers, so definitely like Chinese ninjas and Kid with the Golden Arm. And
yeah, I'm a huge fan of those as well. So yeah, I've shared this with a few people who've been curious about it, because I've talked about it before on other shows, and they want me to talk about it with them, and it blows their mind every time I've showed it to them. So yeah, this is a big one. I'm a huge fan of this one. So with that, before we go, is there any final parting honorable mentions? Just throw their names out.
There was a bunch that I had on my list. I kind of keep whittling it down. Said Death Machine with Brad Dourif. It's also the film debut of Rachel Weisz in a cameo, film debut of Richard Brake in a starring role. So it's nice seeing this guy that I thought was amazing back in I think '96 when it came out, and he's getting this huge starring roles now with like Bingo Hell, so bad it's good kind of way. It's like got some great twists in there and things you just don't see coming. yeah, there's just so many good ones. This is Stakeland and Mulberry Street, both with Nick DeMisi, are both really good. I think Mulberry Street's one of my preferred zombie movies because it goes kind of in a whole nother direction with everything, how it comes about, how they look, just everything is so unique in that one. Almost on my list too was Bad Moon, 1996. That has always been one of my favorite werewolf movies, and nobody had ever heard of it. And then suddenly, like 5, 6 years ago, it started popping up everywhere. Like everybody's like best werewolf movies, and that's in the top 5 almost every single time. So it's like I was trying to get the love it deserves, so I kind of cut that one out. But so there's just so many great films that just don't get any traction. And one, two, you got me thinking about. You mentioned the Asian horror films. Is Ryohei Kitamura's Versus. Like that one is just so out there. It's so much fun. It's Evil Dead with samurai swords and zombies and just all kinds of action-packed sequences, but monsters, and it's just its own little thing, and I love that one.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, yeah. For my list, I was like you. I had Blood Moon. I had Bad Moon. Like you said, a lot more people are talking about it. I also, like I said, I had Session 9 just because, like we were saying earlier. I also had a creature feature called Splinter. Uh, I know a lot of people that like it that have seen it, but again, one that I don't think is as much beloved as it should be. And the last one I had is a another Japanese splatter film. Not that the title again it gives it away, but Tokyo Gore Police.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is a lot of fun.
yeah, I mean the title should give it away what kind of a film this is. But yeah, at the risk of being here all night, just rounding off titles, I think that that'll wrap us up. So before we go ahead and let everybody know about your work, where they can find you, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I have an author page on Facebook. It's David O'Hanlon author. But also you can reach out to me on just my regular Facebook. I don't distinguish the two too often. But as I do mention the writing stuff on both sides, but my personal page has a little bit more of my kids and stuff like that. But I have absolutely no problem with reaching out with fans there. And it's the best way to keep up with everything. I do have Instagram. Just lately, it's been so crazy. I don't have time for all the hashtags to really get the posts to go around where I need them to. But find us there. Amazon. I did an adaptation of 1972's Horror Express. If you're looking for something a little more family friendly, that's probably your best choice. Other than that, I've been doing the Babysitter Massacre book series. We have 3 books out now: Daddy's Little Killer, Family Splatters, and Camp Carnage. And the 4th book, Murder Cove, should be out hopefully by New Year's. It's with our editor. We've got the title or the cover art back recently. It looks fantastic. It's my favorite cover so far, in fact, and they all look pretty good. So definitely each one's kind of a throwback to a different kind of slasher film. The first one I kind of went more towards Giallo. The second one I took some it's from New French Extremity, like High Tension and Inside, which are 2 of my favorites. The third one I went with straight up 80s kind of camp slasher. And this new one that's coming out, Murder Cove, is kind of more of a supernatural vibe, kind of Final Destination at times. So like I say, every time it's a little bit different. So it's always about a babysitter in peril, but you never know what that peril is going to be. So there's always something for somebody. And they're standalone novels, so you don't have to read them all. You just get a little bit more enjoyment if you do, because there are little like Easter eggs and throwbacks. But we got those going full steam now. I've got an anthology coming out hopefully in the next 2 weeks that features myself and 13 other artists, including C. Courtney Joyner, the screenwriter of Puppet Master 3. And then we have 6 or 7 more books lined up for next year, ranging from anthologies to my own stuff, plus the Babysitter Massacres. And I'm officially doing it for the Dolls of Horror podcast.
Nice. All right. Yeah. We'll definitely share your links in the show notes below for you to catch all that. So yeah, this has been a fun episode. Thank you so much for joining in, and we will see you next time.